inches of snow on the ground.
I'm really, really tired today.
It's beautiful.
Well, you're already up, there's no going back to bed anymore.
There he is, Mike. Rich is online. It looks like, and Marcia's going to be a little late. But we got, at least we got 6 to 7 on hand. Plus Jake, plus John, Dan. Whenever you are ready to have this thing launched. we
Not
can
quite,
launch.
not quite ready yet, sorry.
You let me know.
Shouldn't that be wax plural?
Vertical and taking nourishment. So I think you're on the head of the game.
Why? Why would they do it?
Should have gone over an exercise. Never made me. It's not a high.
Hey, it's for order. They ordered 3. I got some,
How are you?
right now. Yeah. More important. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, you probably have scrapper. We have. Short.
Yeah.
Two big one each other, one of them, we couldn't even pick on that.
Just a joy. Yeah. Well,
We're ready.
Okay, it is time to begin. All the committee are present except for Marcia, who will join us shortly. So I'm calling the meeting to order and turning it over to Jake to lead the discussion on the garage heat issue. Jake.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Joe. So I would like to discuss the garage heat issue a little bit here, if I may. We've done some investigation with a couple of different vendors. Jaybird Mechanical, our new mechanical contractor, came in and they reviewed the situation with the garage heat. And they reviewed the different locations and the fan control and the different ideas to mitigate the heat. And their opinion of it was that the best solution would be to move a few of the condensers outside. Some co-ops have done a mix of outside, inside, but to compensate for the problem that we're having, it was their opinion that they be moved outside, especially given, for example, the one that cools this room. It's just on a feedback loop of trying to cool the room, but then pulling in the same hot air that it was using to cool the room, and it just goes on and on and on. It's hard on the equipment, it's not efficient, and they recommend moving them outside. Also, we did have a geothermal vendor come in from Hardy Mechanical, Nate, and he reviewed the property in a very basic sense, nothing too extensive. And his recommendation, if we were to consider geothermal, that the cost would be fairly high to start, in the tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Typically, those kinds of things are done at the inception of a building or a property, not retroactively. And his recommendation also was to consider moving certain of the air conditioners outside. He thinks the mini splits are fine, which are the Mitsubishis on the wall. He does not think the large condensers on the ground are acceptable to be down there. Dr. Sturm has done a lot of work on different things with the fan control and different things. I'd like him to talk about some of the ideas he had if he is amenable to that. I believe he's on the call today.
I
He's done
am.
a lot of work and he's been kind of dealing with this since the beginning. And John, if you would like to speak to John Holting, if you'd like to speak on this too, that would be great. This is just 2 recommendations from 2 vendors that I've spoken to in the past month about our situation. I also am going to show some pictures over Zoom and for the committee here in the great room of what other co-ops have done when addressing this problem and moving them outside to make the condensers a little less unsightly. Thank you. Take it away, Tom.
Okay, I'm up next. Let's see, do I have video? No, I don't. So absent voice, you just have to imagine that I'm there. First of all, I want to say opportunity to speak to everybody and kind of bring everybody along on this ride. We tried to look at all the alternatives, and as with any good engineering problem, each one has installation and equipment costs. Each one has downsides in terms of noise and space, and a certain amount of uncertainty as to whether it's going to actually solve the problem or how much of the problem it will solve. Also has operating costs, excuse me, and an effect on existing or current equipment in the building. In particular, I want to draw up the alternative of doing nothing. Doing nothing has a cost. Right now, that cost, as calculated and actually reimbursed by United Properties, is slightly over $4,200 a year, which works out to $210 per resident on the first floor for each year. And then you have the common areas on the first floor, which work out to an additional over $2,300 a year for the common areas. When you get down to dollars and cents, it's and figuring all the costs, it's just under $6,600 a year. So that's kind of the number you're working with in terms of what it's costing to do nothing, plus the cost of what little we do run the fan. So we've looked at a variety of alternatives, including putting in timers in the basement. Of course, that has the problem of running the exhaust fan and makeup air unit. For code compliance reasons, dealing with the fact that that fan is also used to evacuate noxious gases so that people don't die in the basement from carbon monoxide poisoning or nitrogen dioxide from the hybrid vehicles. That has 1 speed, full on. Some people don't like the whooshing noise when they're in their basement. Some people don't like the noise when it's outside. Virtually every alternative is still going to require that fan be operated occasionally to evacuate hot air in the summer. And it also has the necessity of occasionally running in the winter to heat the basement. There is a heating unit in there. So the notion that that makeup air unit is never going to run except in an emergency is a fallacy. In addition to that, should the carbon monoxide detectors fail, their normal failure mode is with the fan on, but they have been known to fail in the not operating the equipment mode. And in that case, the fan must be run or the building evacuated. And I'm guessing that running the fan on a timer would be preferable for just about everybody than evacuating the building. So from a safety standpoint, we got to get a timer on there. And it's not one that somebody has to sit down there and turn on every hour and watch it to make sure that it doesn't get stuck in the process of clicking down from an hour to 0. That's just a gotta be. The question of moving air conditioners has come up. And the question is, do we move the 3 large just units, which is 15 tons of air conditioning? Do we move 8 of the units, all of the floor mounted units? Do we move all 13 air conditioners? And I think we've pretty much concluded that we do not want to move any of the 5 mini splits. And there's a variety of technical reasons for that. But one of them is that they not only cool, but they heat, and they can't get cold. They are cooling electronic equipment, the elevators, the equipment rooms for telephone, cable, TV, internet, and those can't get cold in the winter because they don't work. If they get cold in the winters, they have to be inside for technical reasons. So those should not get moved. Let's see. I think we do need to get some outside expertise. You know, I can do this as a amateur, but I think a professional is going to provide much more certainty about the uncertainty, if nothing else. I still think geothermal should be on the table for a variety of reasons. And I'll let John Callahan go into that more. Still on the table is the possibility of just literally air conditioning the garage, putting in a conventional large air conditioner in the garage and distributing the air over the existing units. I thought that was a ridiculous idea, but I think one of the vendors actually suggested it. I think John Callahan will talk more about that. I believe Excel Energy is coming in to do the energy audit. I think Jake has that arranged. I'll let him talk about that. I continue every time I investigate this to be totally frustrated by what has been foisted on us as builts that have an unreliable relationship with reality. And I'm going to leave it there and take questions. Thank you.
I think we'll delay questions to the end.
I'll be here.
Good. Thank you, Tom.
Can I present some of the pictures of what some of the other co-ops have done, particularly New Brighton? Okay. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Let me just make sure that everyone on Zoom can see. Why is it not giving me the option to share? Oh, there we go. My apologies. Okay, so here's what one co-op did. John, what was the term they used to call them?
Dog houses.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so this is one that they have outside and they built an enclosure. This is another one. Well, the same one, kind of from a different angle.
We're not seeing it on Zoom.
It says I'm sharing my screen right now. Can everyone?
I'm seeing your directory and a little icon image of the doghouse.
Okay. Try to make it a little bigger. How about now?
No change.
No change. Okay, well. You still can't see it?
That's correct.
I'm not certain what is happening, but I do have it on screen share and I have it open, so I'm not sure what the issue is, but this is what they look like and I'll describe what it is. Basically outside at different points of the property, whether it's along their path or against their building, they built wooden enclosures with the magic packs, with the air conditioners sitting outside in different areas, and they have a little enclosure built around each of them, and that was their solution when they moved them outside. I apologize to the folks on Zoom. I'm not certain what the problem is, why it's not displaying, but you should be able to see these images. And if anybody wants to see them, I'll send them after the meeting and they can review them at that time.
Are these primarily sound abatement, or
John, could you speak to the purpose of why they built them?
are they basically primarily for sound, or is it aesthetics thing?
Both,
Well,
both, yes. So the major issue when talking with the lead tech over at New Brighton, because I actually went through and the entire portfolio of Ebenezer to get see where everyone's at, okay, just so you know. But with Brent over there, it was after year one. The complaints were so, they were about the heat in the garage. And Brent's comment to the board was, move them outside. And then he came up and developed the strategic piece as it relates to the doghouse treatment, as well as, I'm going to call it the
Thank you.
fence around. Can you hear me?
Not only can I hear you, but now we can see them.
Okay. So this was a solution for them. And they are one, let's see, I have 10 co-ops in our portfolio, 10 of them that moved every single condenser outside. And New Brighton was one of them. And then 2 other Applewood points that moved it out. And this is the only one where they've got the fencing and the dog houses in there. Everybody else has strategically placed the condensers based on logistics, based on design, engineering, and length of run and line sets and all that good stuff. We have about 12 other co-ops that it's split. Some of them kept the heat pumps inside, which Mr. Sturm had indicated was inappropriate, and he's right because of what they're conditioning, okay? But some of the older co-ops, they have AC onlys. They didn't have heat pumps, okay? But they need them to operate in the critical areas. So we've got 12 of those co-ops that I'm going to call it mixed, where they have some out, some in. I had one co-op, Applewood Point, that and they're a mature Applewood Point. They're about 15 years old. And as they need to replace their air conditioning units, they're moving them outside just because of the conversations that you all are having. Now, granted, I'm not here to suggest moving them out. That's a decision for everyone here to do, okay? I'm just letting you know what I got. I've got 11 co-ops that either for economic reasons or just some of the discussions that you are struggling with, okay, and having conversations, that they are still in the garage. But they also don't have the same amount of units that you do. I will tell you, there's only 2 co-ops, Applewood Point co-ops. You're one, and then there's another one that still have their units inside of the garage. Just so you know. And that was just information that I tried to gather for this meeting. Okay.
So to speak to one thing that Dr. Sturm had said about adding a cooling element to the garage, that is something that, while on the surface sounds like a ridiculous suggestion, it is something that is, I would say, in practice, yeah, you could do that and it would work.
And to Jake's comment, and Dr. Sturm's comment, yes, that is an alternate solution, but I'm not sure it's the most viable solution. Yes, you would love to be able to put a 12-ton horizontal coil on that air handler down there and turn it into an air conditioner, or have a separate air handling unit that is a cool only. But I think you're sending good money after bad, okay, in doing that. Only because of it's still, we have to overcome the source problem, which is the heat load that's being emitted from these condensing units. And you not only have to build and design and engineer that air conditioning system to not only take care of the conditioning of the environment, but also overcome the heat that's being dispelled from those units.
I have a question
Sure.
on that concept.
Mhm.
And I would agree, it doesn't make a lot of sense to recool, because now you're putting in, how are you going to condense this 12-ton, 30-ton cooling unit,
Yeah.
other than with a cooling tower
Mhm.
or a geothermal,
Mhm.
type of thing?
Sure. Mhm.
But your installation cost is going to be significant in that case.
Mhm.
And a cooling tower, a 20-ton, 30-ton cooling tower or dry cooler, whatever,
Yeah.
is going to be sitting outside,
Mhm.
introducing noise and unsightliness, which is the very reason that these were put in the garage.
Correct.
So to me, it doesn't make any sense to start considering air conditioning.
Mhm. Of the environment down
Yeah,
there.
the air
Yeah.
conditioning, the air conditioners.
Granted, it's an option, but in my humble opinion, it's not the solution. It's an answer, but it's not a solution, in my humble opinion. But with that said, this comes back to each one of you trying to make that decision. But I'm not on board on that unless I can get an engineer's perspective that it could work that way. But I've designed some really unique stuff in my HVAC business. But I just think that we'd be throwing a lot of money at this. I really do. And I'll touch on geothermal that John did and Dr. Sturm did when it's my turn. Okay. Because there is some conversation there. Oh, you want me to go? I'm taking my cues from Jake for those on Zoom. Okay. Just so you know. So when he gives me the hand go. So I just want to make sure you all understand it. So geothermal, I got it. I mean, the conversation always is when is the best time to do geothermal? It's when you're building the building. Okay. And I got that. But it doesn't mean you can't retrofit geothermal. It makes it a little bit higher in cost to get there. Okay. It does, because you're in restrictive access. You have to look at the equipment. Okay. Because some of you who have been around geothermal units, okay, they're typically installed indoors, okay, and they do have some outdoor ones, but I'm not there yet from a old HVAC and geo guy. But the reality is that when you're looking at it, and I think did I share with the group the soil well drills that, okay. So one of the things I did note in this area, okay, no matter if it's, I mean, I started to get a little anxious because when you live on Quarry Road, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, okay, so what do I got there? Limestone or whatever, but the static water table is relatively high, okay, for us, not low, but high, okay? And your geothermal loop, depending on if we're able to find that static water, it loves water. The loop itself loves that water, okay? And you may not have to put as much pipe in, but that's what a loop field designer software that I used to use. I could be able to identify soil conditions. I could be able to determine how much loop I need in the ground. Dr. Sturm, I believe, did bring up several different, you got to go with a slinky, you can go with horizontal boring and drilling, okay, vertical drill, vertical well systems. The dilemma you face is just not the loop. It's the mechanicals in the building. Now you're needing to retrofit. So the condensers go away and your coils may have to change. You can still use the furnaces as the delivery mechanism for air, and then you put them as backup, particularly during heating season, okay? So there's a lot of cost, and some people have asked me, can you tell me how much it would cost? Okay, so I used to tell people in smaller applications, not bigger ones like this, but smaller applications, I would tell people, depending on how we get the loop in the ground, you can be between $5,000 and $7,000 per ton. Okay, so you can take that 15 ton and do your math. In a commercial application, it may even fare even farther. Okay, but that's when you start asking the questions. Okay, how are we going to get there? Are we going to take the full load with us? But the heat is injected into the loop. It's not, doesn't stay inside the confines of the garage. It doesn't. It is injected. Yes, you have a cabinet, you have a compressor in it, but you have a pump pack, you have delivery mechanisms for the loop, and then you're in your, that compressor inside of the geothermal system is driving that heat into the loop. Okay. And it's a closed loop system. Okay. Is it an option? Yes, but we're going to, I'll be candid with you. I haven't quoted a geothermal system in several years since I left the HVAC mechanical business. I don't even know where pricing is right now, but I could say at a minimum, you're going to be over $100,000 to consider it. But is it the solution? It could be. It could be. And the key is we'd have to work with the local city, jurisdiction. One of the things that did come up, and I think I addressed it in the email response back to the team here, is the open loop system. Yeah, when I left the industry in 2012, the state of Minnesota in the late 2000s says, yeah, you guys don't get to play that way anymore. We aren't going to let you tap into an aquifer and pull the water out and then drop it back in. We're not going to let you do that anymore. It is because of the groundwater situation and water that we have within the state of Minnesota. So they stopped it. Now, are there systems right now that are open loop? Yep. I could take you to a couple up north, not north in the cities. I'm talking north, okay, towards, into the smaller communities where people build a cabin and all of a sudden they got an open loop system. And you ask the question, well, how'd you do that? Well, it's been here for 20 years. So that I don't think is going to be a discussion, because I could tell you probably the state of Minnesota as well as the local municipality isn't going to let you do an open loop. Just won't. Okay. But geothermal is a viable option. It just depends on the amount of, does it outweigh the benefit of investing versus the solution? But it is a possible solution, and it would have to be engineered. It would. There is cleanness to it because you have identified, and we do, I think Mr. Sturman mentioned it, the 3.5 tons. Okay, that's 15 tons. Could you do just the 15 tons and move that out? Yep. So help me out. You got those 3, but how many more condensers? Forget about the mini splits. So we got 3 more condensers downstairs. Okay. So the question is do we leave them alone? But they are smaller in size and capacity load. Would that offset some of the heat issues down there? Yeah, but if you're gonna do it, would you consider just doing all 6 of them? You know, and then get it all out of there. And that's just, it's a very difficult discussion, and ultimately it will be a very difficult decision in the end. Any questions on the geothermal piece?
I have a question,
Sure.
if I may.
Yeah.
I want to combine two concepts. One is the geothermal and the other is air conditioning the basement. And I'm wondering if you could have a geothermally powered standalone air conditioning system in the basement that would dump cold air on top of the in the areas where we have the existing compressors. It's a thought.
So can I say yes-ish? Okay.
Yeah, but it's not a question of is it theoretically possible? It's
Yeah.
a question of is it a reasonable engineering thing that one wouldn't just laugh away if you talk to a thermal engineer.
No, they wouldn't laugh away that, because if your application is to do that, but I would want to make sure that I'm getting my appropriate loads off of the heat admittance, which I think we can clearly try to figure that out. And then how much are we attacking? Okay. If it's just going to be in a certain area, but then remember, heat will go to cold. Cold is forced to heat. Okay. So if you do design an air handling unit, well, a traditional, I'm going to call it a traditional air handler, in a small design, 5 ton of air handling movement. Okay. You get bigger than that, then we may be adding additional geothermal equipment to be able to offset that. But that, like Dr. Stern said, there are companies out there that have various products available for some of these things and these build outs. Okay. You got water furnace, you've got, well, Econar was bought up by another company, but there are some good companies out there. But then there's also, I'm going to call it larger manufacturers that do just in geothermal on large scale. And it's a conversation, Dr. Sturm, it is. Is it the right alternate solution? That's a difficult discussion for this group. It is. But great question and great theory. It is.
Just one other thing here. You were talking about the conventional units in the basement. And just to give you an idea here, the where am I going with this? I had it. The 3 largest units add up to 15 tons.
Yep.
There's a total of 8 conventional units, and they add up to 28.5 tons. Just to give you an idea. So there's 2 5s, there's a 4, there's a 3, there's a 2.5, and there's 2 2s.
Okay.
Just so you have some numbers.
All right. So in essence, is your question is do you take that complete load out of the garage and convert it into geothermal application? Is that your question?
No, it's the question is, do you build 8 dog houses or do you attempt to build fewer than 8 and then figure out how to remove the remaining heat? Well, the other thing is that's also if you're going to do any kind of air conditioning in the basement, you know, you have to look at that. I mean, the total load, including the mini splits, is 33.75 tons. or 405,000 BTU per hour.
That's a lot of air movement, don't you think, Dr. Stern?
Well, the cooling power of the makeup air unit is 351,000 BTU per hour at a
Mm-hmm,
10-degree temperature change.
mm-hmm. That's
So
the existing one?
yes,
Okay,
you can't keep up with it if they're all running and you
Mhm.
only have a 10-degree temperature change.
gotcha. I have to sit down and think a little bit more on that. No offense to anybody. I just have to sit down and think a little bit more about that.
I put it on a spreadsheet but I didn't have an engineer look at it. I'm not sure. There's something about the relative humidity that I need to worry about
Mm-hmm,
when I'm moving that air, and I don't know how to handle that aspect of it.
sure.
The enthalpy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
I'm done.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to bring up here. One, first of all, this is good to get some understanding of what some potential options are. The board is in the process of looking at or hiring an attorney to give us an opinion as far as how we can address this issue with United Properties and the design engineers. That's up soon. Or we'll be discussing that and probably having that discussion with an attorney and finding out what our potential options are, if we have any for that. And that'll be happening soon. Along with that, there's probably an indication that they will be requesting, or will need to find an engineer to propose some potential solutions that address all of the issues, not just the heat, but the noise and the aesthetic piece of it. So that's all in the process. And more than likely, an attorney, if we go that route, will probably have some recommendations or a requirement to use one of several engineers that they work with. So that's one piece. The other piece I think that we still haven't addressed is we talk about there's heat in the garage, and the heat in the garage is causing excess cooling costs for residents on first floor. And my concern is that we haven't established what the ultimate outcome and what's going to be a measurement of a success. Because we've had issues where people are comparing their costs to someone else that they feel has the same unit, and their cost should be the same, and there's differences of $100 a month in cooling, in electric bills. I think if we pulled all the heat out, which basically was the assumption that was made with the United Properties rebate that they gave us, was worked out to, as Tom said, about $200 a year per first floor resident. And you spread that over 3 or 4 months, 5 months maybe, you're talking $40, $50 a month difference. So if people are expecting their electric bills are going to drop by $100 by removing all the heat, that's not going to happen. So we need to establish what it is we're really trying to do. Are we trying to get the heat out of the garage, or are we trying to lower electric bills on the first floor? The other piece that hasn't been brought up is how many tons of heat load does each car that comes in and parks down in the garage add? Do we need to take that into account in addition to the condensers? So I mean, it becomes a very complex engineering problem, and all of which are quite costly to implement. And if we're going to take something like that on, we need to have a full understanding of what's happening. So I think our position right now, as far as a board goes, is to see what the attorney recommends. Do we have a recourse with United Properties? And we may have some. It could get, the recommendation may be that, yeah, you have a recourse, but it's pretty minimal. And that if you're really looking for a solution, you're going to have to come up with costs and funding yourself. And then it gets into an issue of what's the possibility of having the whole community agree to spending $100,000 for what we feel is a solution to a hot garage issue. So I mean, there's a number of things that need to be discussed, and you know, at this point, I'm not sure how much further you want to take it. I think we probably want to wait at least till we hear from an attorney and see what our options from a legal standpoint are. And once we either eliminate those or decide we're going to push forward, then we can start looking at engineering solutions.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Sturm for coming on, John Callahan coming here, John Holting adding on. I just really wanted to have this conversation on Zoom in a meeting, a little bit more time taken just so we could get all these things on the table. I do agree with John. Right now, the board is actively engaged, trying to go this different route than I think that's gone before. So I think we should see how that transitions and where it goes. But I do think it's important for everyone in this committee to keep in mind what the options are, regardless of what's going on with that situation. And honestly, if we look at the totality of this, the options are, do nothing, transition to geothermal as we have failure of units and come up with a plan of how we're going to do that, cool the garage, or move them outside. Those are the options that we have. And that's something I think the committee should keep in mind. And I think we should probably at this point be in a holding pattern until the board has done their work with legal representation. And I just want to again thank Joe for giving us the time, and Tom, John, and John for helping talk this out.
Is this time for questions? Okay. Has anyone got some kind of a estimate on what it would cost to move, let's say 6 of the larger units, or all 8 or whatever is required to get them out of the garage? In other words, replumb them and do all that. Anybody got any idea what that would cost?
United Properties had determined that it was about a $5,000 cost to move 3 units outside as they sit. So if we extrapolate that to move another 4 units outside is going to be another, $12,000, $13,000 on top of the 5. And that's putting them as close to the building as possible, which puts the condensers next to people's patios or decks. It puts one right out here at the next to the what?
By the trash can?
Well, it would be someplace in this general area right outside next to the patio. And the issue is going to be noise. And I see that as being a major issue. And I'm going to argue and fight for a silent solution. And building a doghouse around it isn't going to cut down enough of the noise. Now, there are other options. We can look at quiet condensers, variable speed condensers that have quite a bit of a lower noise signature and the like, but those all add to this cost. So, we've got a lot of things to look at, and that's partly what any recommendation or request from an engineering firm will be, to address all of the solution, all of the issues.
Okay. I'd like to move on to get some of our other business taken care of before we perhaps return to any additional questions. That brings us back to our agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda will be the minutes of our meetings of the regular meeting of the 8th of October and our special meetings of 25 October and 5 November. We've all received those minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, changes to be made to those? Could I have a motion to accept one or all of them?
I move we accept all the minutes.
Is there a
of all three
second?
meetings.
Mike has seconded it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Rich. In that case, we can move on to the third item and brings Jake up for all sorts of things. Lucky Jake. Jake, would you like to start with item 3, sump pumps?
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to ask John, please, could you speak to the specificity of what the problem is, as this is not an area that I am super familiar with. I'm going to pass this around while John explains what happened, and it'll be in more detail. Thank you, John.
Thank you. So what's being passed around is a check valve that was on some pump system, okay, down in the basement, which caused a little water issue. And there was a plumber that came in, assisted, and replaced the check valve. Initially, you're always thinking, okay, how could we look forward and trying to prevent this from happening again? Okay, because we don't want that. I mean, we don't want to have to worry. So one of the things that when I was talking with the plumber, I said, so this check valve that has been passed around seems to be a little light duty. Now, that is an opinion. That is not a fact, okay? Well, he concurred that it's typically used. He sees this style of check valve used in a residential application, maybe a 1/2 horsepower pump or maybe max 3/4 pump. My understanding, because I have not looked at your submittals, okay? Typically what I'm seeing in those storm drains and pump is 5 horsepower, okay? So this thing is, if it's truly a 5 horsepower pump that's in there, then it's moving through a check valve that isn't really built for it, okay? Now, I can't make the determination of why this got installed. I don't have that information or anything, but the resolve is to install a check valve that would handle the flow, the pressure, head pressure, everything. And it seems to be a discussion for everyone here is, do we want to be proactive in looking at each one of these discharge pipes to make sure that we got adequate check valve, or do we wait till failure? Okay. And that failure could contribute to water issues that will end up, and then we catch it and then we address it. So with that said, humbly, because of the discussion I had, because of design issues with regards to how heavy or how big these pumps are, I would strongly consider replacing these check valves in a proactive approach rather than reactive. But again, I don't make those decisions. And that is a very humble opinion of mine.
John, how many check valves are there and what's the cost of the 5 horsepower ones?
Jake?
Josh from Plumbing Restoration is working on getting us a bid. I believe there's 5 to 6 of them. He went through with Arturo and got inside the pits and looked at them. So we'll have that probably next week. So I
And
don't
the
have a
cost?
specific number.
What's the
He
cost?
said between 2 and 3, but I'll have a more specific number when he lets me know.
Between 2 and 3 what?
$2,000 and $3,000. Sorry, I should have been more specific.
Is that to replace all of them?
The rest of them, yes.
Okay, I don't think there's any action from us at this point. but this is more informational. If the board wants us to do something, revise them on it, they will, I'm sure, tell us. Jake, could you report on the status of the first floor energy audit?
Yeah, so I'm working with Excel. I haven't gotten confirmation as to when they're going to come out, but I've moved that process along now that I've kind of gotten the sense that we're going to go that direction. And once I have dates and times they're going to be here, I intend to inform the first floor membership, letting them know that they will be around to check on everything. So as soon as the young lady from Excel gets back to me, I will get back to the building committee and then the first floor members.
Do we know what specifically they're doing in this? Is this a typical Excel energy audit that's done with the intent of saving energy?
Typically, yes, but I expanded upon some of our issues and some of the concerns that were voiced to me about parasitic loads and meters not working correctly and things maybe not being transmitted back successfully to the energy provider. And so they were going to look into some of those things as well.
And are they going into individual units? Is that part of?
They
their-
might select a few, as from what I understood, just to review. But again, I'm still getting all of the details from the person I was working with Excel.
Any questions? Okay, Jake, you said there was a hardy board issue you wanted to address.
Yes, so I asked the members' permission last month to go over this issue. I'm not sure how widespread it is yet, but I will again share the screen in the great room to show some pictures. I think it'll be more of a success this time because I figured out what I was doing wrong. Oh. All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, one moment. All right, I believe everyone can see what's on the screen. Okay, so to start this, I need to get my notes here. So it was reported to me by Unit 419, Richard Lindemeyer, that he noticed a crack in his post of his deck and a sway or bend to it. There was some other members that approached me citing his problem as well. So I went up with Arturo to review. Some other members went out there and measured that they thought there was some deck separation from the building. That turned out not to be the case. This is, if you can kind of see, you can see how it's kind of bending a certain direction. So I called Weiss, Matt Booth from Weiss. We are still in dialogue about when they're going to get somebody out here. If you can see here in the picture, there's these cracks up and down in the hardy board. And there are other pictures that will kind of show kind of the bend happening up and down on the post. You can see this one is fairly straight, but this one also has a few cracks. That again was taken to try to determine if there was some extreme separation coming from the building. That again turned out to not be the case. But to specifically say what is going to happen now is Matt is going to send someone out from Weiss to come review it. We did have another vendor that works with Ebenezer come review the deck for structural issues. At the time of his review, he did not perceive there to be any structural issues where the deck would fall down or anything like that. He did say, though, that he thinks a couple of different things could have happened. There could be moisture in there that caused the cracking in the bow. The post could be having some problems where it turned due to moisture and it just kind of turned a funny direction, causing strain. And John could correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, it caused strain on the hardy board, would cause it to buckle. My intention is once Arturo finishes the Magic Pack and appliance review, that unfortunately he's gonna have to go to every single unit again and look at every deck to see if this is fairly widespread. I don't know if it is. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened. I'm still in that conversation, but it's something potentially we may need to keep in our crosshairs, as this could become something that happens later on as well to other decks.
Just a question. Are the hardy board, is that a cladding or framing around the post?
Yeah, so it's as far as I understand, it's a decorative piece. It's a
Okay.
framing around the post. So that's what's been hard to determine, both by Matt and other people at Weiss, is it the post moving, or is it the hardy board itself that has the moisture problem? So more investigation will have to occur.
So I know on my deck, the hardy board is not well sealed, shall we say. There's some where the boards come together. Anyway, that may be a problem. Okay, Jake, hallway temperatures.
Okay, so I received a communication regarding concern over the hallway temperatures in the building. When Matthew was here and now that Arturo is here, we've been managing the temperatures in the hallways. Part of the reason why it's very warm on the first floor is the slabs are still very hot. Arturo went with his temperature laser device to measure the temperature of the slabs. They're still in the high 70s, low 80s, most of them, especially the ones that are over the condensers. So I would anticipate that's why the heat on the first floor feels so high. All those thermostats have been set according to what was recommended to us by Jaybird. So we set them lower on the first floor. Oh, sorry, a little bit higher on the first floor, not much, and then lower on the corresponding hallways as we go up. The common area rooms, I have gotten requests from members saying they're too cold. So those are a little higher than the hallways. I'm not sure if the committee or the board wants to establish a policy of what the thermostat should be set at, but we have been managing the thermostats in the common space in the hallways. The commons, like the great room and club room, we've been more, going with what people have requested. But the hallways we've been kind of managing since I arrived.
Any questions, Jake? I don't want to get into fooling around with common area thermostats if I can avoid it, because sure as one person says it's too cold, another person is going to say it's too hot and vice versa. So I prefer to stay out of it. Okay, in that case, Marcia, thermostats.
Good morning, everybody. So a little bit of history about the thermostats is when we moved in here, we learned that the thermostats were placed on the wall such that somebody in a wheelchair would be able to read the thermostat. But that makes the rest of us who are not in a wheelchair not able to very clearly see the temperature and manage the thermostat. So I know the thermostats were replaced for those people who wanted it, but that new thermostat did not work with our Magic Packs very well. So in the meantime, we've been trying to decide what we want to do with that issue. And so Jake and I met, and he gave me a couple of ideas from a company called Pro for thermostats that would be still placed in the area where they were in the past. And there were two models that he showed me. One was just a single stage and not programmable at all. And the other was a single stage that was programmable. In other words, you could set the temperature for a certain day or certain hours or whatever on that thermostat. So his suggestion to us was, and in the meantime, Bob had also done a spreadsheet with all of the models of thermostats that Excel will sell us at a discounted rate. So in conversation with Jake, what he was suggesting is that we look at these models from Pro and choose one that we would buy a new one for every single unit in the building. Then the question would be, if people aren't satisfied with that, would they be able to, at their own expense, you choose one of the thermostats from Excel? According to Bob's spreadsheet, they all work with our Magic Packs. And they would all be, from the ones from Excel, would all be acceptable to be able to use with our Magic Packs. So the question on the table that I think we have is, do we want to replace all of the thermostats for every single unit? And if we do, which unit or which thermostatic unit would we choose? And would we allow people to also choose from the Excel products if they wanted to have their own thermostat that was different?
Okay, could you send to all the members of the committee the information on those?
I thought I
Did
did,
you?
but
Okay.
I will double check and I'll actually just resend it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's easiest sometimes.
yeah.
And we can look at it. We haven't got a formal charge from the board on this. Do we need one, John, or should we just keep looking at it?
Well, I think the bottom line is what's the cost? If we go
Well, we'll-
replace all of them, are we talking $30 a piece? Or are we talking $130 a piece? And we need to have a justification to move it.
Right.
Or to do it, and then what the
Right.
cost is going to be, and then
Okay.
we'll need to, then we can make a decision. one way or
Okay.
the other.
What we can do then is, Marcia, would you be able to generate I don't know, Jake can tell you how many thermostats we'd need and what that would run so that we have a base cost estimate.
Jake, do you know what these thermostats cost individually?
I don't. I know they're not very expensive. And the reason that this was brought up was this past summer, folks that got the new thermostat with the big display is not compatible with the Magic Pack. And there was a lot of overtime paid out and a lot of hours spent on the phone with members who had no AC. And I did have Arturo during this review of the Magic Packs and the appliances get what model of thermostat folks are using. And there is a split between the original Honeywell and the new thermostat that was purchased, I think, what was it, a year and a half ago? So, and those are not suitable for what is in the building. So we can look and see what the cost is. Maybe we just buy for the people that have the new one. So something works, as we don't have the Honeywells anymore to reinstall. But I would just say from our operations standpoint is it's kind of a decision you have to make, whether you want to buy thermostats for the folks that have the new one that doesn't work, or you want to pay Art to drive in to reset thermostats so they work, because some folks are not able to do it themselves over the phone with instruction. And that's a cost that the co-op has to absorb. That's, an hour, 2 hours of overtime every time he has to come out here and help someone. So just something to keep in mind.
Marcia can generate some of the cost numbers for
Okay.
us and then send that and the material around.
Yep.
And I think we might need to, you and I maybe should talk about this at some point.
Okay,
After you've done that.
yeah, sounds good.
Maybe get John, Jake involved, to see what we think we want to do on this one, where we want the committee to go.
Okay, great.
Okay, is there any other business before the committee at this point? Jake?
I just wanted to touch on crosstown construction that's been here, behalf of Weiss doing some exterior work. There was a report by Andy Blaho, and I'm again going to share my screen. I apologize. I feel like I've been doing that this whole meeting, but I just want everyone to see what's going on around the building so there's no confusion. During their work, and I had other units that I know that they were up against their unit doing the exterior work. Andy began to notice during their pounding little bumps that appeared on his wall. And I'm going to share my screen now, and cracks. Sorry, Rich, we're gonna minimize. We know you're here. Okay, so you see this little bump indentation of where the nail went into the wall and crack, and now there's all these little bumps. Anybody who's had them pounding on your wall, I'm also going to put in the bulletin, please review your wall for any of these now imperfections in the drywall and the paint. I've already informed Weiss that this happened. They're going to be sending someone. Again, it's kind of like the Bible. I will not know the day. I will not know the hour, because their communication skills are not fantastic, but they have guaranteed me that they will come out and they will fix this. So I'm going to put in the bulletin, anybody who's seen them outside their windows pounding, they're going to need to check their walls to see if they did damage. So that is something else that occurred. And I apologize, Joe, to spring this on you so last minute. It kind of was sprung on me last minute within the past few days. And that's all that I got.
Okay, anything else? Ron?
Yeah, Jay, can you expand? Can you expand on what they were doing here? Or they replaced flashing, or was there? a
Doing the
problem?
flashing, doing a bunch of exterior work that they needed to finish from the 11 month is what I understood. So that's kind of what they were doing. And apparently it is, you know, I'm just the layman, but apparently it is normal for that to occur occasionally when they're doing that work to affect the interior.
Anything else? Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm assuming that we will be having a report on the walk-in tub issue.
I'm still waiting for the vendor to answer all of the questions that the committee submitted. They have not gotten back to me yet.
Okay, once that happens, we will have a meeting on Zoom to try and resolve that and move it forward. Mike?
Jake, when you went to your manager's training event, did you learn any more about that type of application or installation in any of the other co-ops?
Yes, so I did speak to a couple other managers that had that installation completed. Those tubs are quite popular, so they felt from a marketing standpoint, it wouldn't affect marketing issues because a lot of folks do like those. They're easier to get in and out of. Another thing that was told to me was a lot of them do kind of be a draw for certain people to want to buy a share. So they can kind of be a, ooh, look at that. That's kind of a nice feature. And then as far as the questions about, do they procure the permits? Yes, they do. Do they have all of the licensing and bonding? Yeah, that's not an issue. And then noise between units is not an issue that they've ever been aware of. Again, I will say this, in my experience in condos, hotels, other buildings, commercial buildings, noise is such a subjective thing. I could go on for days, and I'm not joking, days about some people. You go in their unit to help them with something, and you think that the people are having a party upstairs. It's just so loud, and they don't say anything, and they've lived there for years. And there's certain people, they call you up to their unit because they hear this noise, and you go up there and you can't hear anything, but they can hear it. You can't. So noise is such a subjective thing. I've been through acoustic testing. I've been through legal things where one homeowner is suing another homeowner because they're convinced they didn't use the correct acoustic underlayment. So noise is something that is going to be hard to know with any kind of 100% certainty because it's such a subjective thing. So that's one thing I'm going to tell you guys. I don't think you're going to get, any kind of guarantee.
Jake, did you get any idea the number of these installations out there?
I can't speak to how many co-ops have it because I only talked to a couple of different managers that had them. But as far as what the vendors told me, they've done thousands of them.
Okay, there are some other things you'll notice in the items for the future that we'll be getting to. We'll also be discussing a suggestion from the social committee regarding an interior redecoration committee of some sort and some other things. But at this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn if we don't have anything else on the horizon. I mean, leaping right out at us anyway. Any motion to adjourn?
I'll motion we adjourn.
Okay, how about a second?
Second.
We're on seconds. All in favor? Okay, we're done. Thank you very much. And thank whoever set up this room. Thank you, Steve.